recording. So no screen share yet so that I can see all of you. Hello! Welcome back to school. It's Tuesday, which in Coralville is our garbage day. So I'm going to wish you a happy garbage day because I'm very happy that they came and picked up my garbage this morning. That tradition, by the way, for those of you who are new, started during the pandemic when I wasn't sure what day of the week it was and when I was supposed to be teaching or doing anything. And garbage day on Tuesday became my anchor point for the week. I knew that if it was garbage day on Tuesday, that I said, see you Thursday. And I knew that if I was teaching and it wasn't garbage day, I said, have a great weekend. So that feels especially fitting for where we're at right now in the brand new year and new semester. So you can see by my name, I am your instructor. I am Lisa. You can call me Dr. Hoffman if you want to, but just Lisa is totally fine. The only person who calls me Dr. Hoffman is my dad because he thinks he's being funny. Dr. Lisa sounds like I should be hosting a radio show and giving advice. So you could try that one too, but that's probably not the most accurate. So I am recording already. So if you arrive late or if your internet drops off or whatever, no worries. You can pick it up afterwards. I have the course webpage open in front of me and I put a link in the chat so that you can all see it as well. That is where all the stuff will be. So I only use Icon for a few things. I like to keep my materials publicly available. That way you can review them on your own as needed, even after the course is over. And so I host everything on my own website right here. So this is where all of our stuff is going to be. As you can see, we've got the Zoom info, as you can see, because I haven't shared yet. You can scroll yourself and look at the first table and see the Zoom info. This will be the address if you want to attend on Zoom or in person, as is your choice. Hopefully Thursday will be warm enough for us to go back into the classroom. And if you're still like, yeah, I still haven't shoveled my driveway, I'm not going anywhere yet, that's fine. Next week maybe will be a little bit better. So, how's everybody doing? Hanging in there? Who has small children running around behind them? Couple people? Math is money. Make sure he knows that, Hillary. Mine is upstairs playing Minecraft with his friends, I think. And yes, can they please go back? That is entirely correct. I've had a hard time getting focused on work over the past week or two because it still feels like winter break because the children are still around. So it's a little bit disorienting, but we're going to make it work. So I prepared some remarks inside a PowerPoint to keep myself from wrangling too much. What's the word I want? Muttering too much? Rambling too much? Yeah, wrangling and rambling. Let's go with that. Comps last week with the children at home. You get extra credit for that. That's something. All right, now I can start the screen share so that you can stay with me and hopefully everything will stay in place as I do that. Okay, it says it's loading. That's promising. Okay, can you see it? My purple slides. Excellent. Each of my classes is color-coded so that I don't upload the materials to the wrong place. This class is going to be purple this semester. All right, we'll get her going. So, first things first, what to expect. My philosophy in teaching quantitative methods is I know that it's not something that a lot of people are drawn to. It's something that a lot of people feel hesitant about, maybe uncertain that they're going to be able to understand the material or keep up or eventually become successful with it. And so I just want to start there. I believe that we can all do this. You all are here for a reason. No matter what that reason is, you've made a good choice in taking advanced quantitative methods, either because you wanted to or someone else told you that you wanted to. So that's where we're going to be. We're all going to be successful. The focus of this class, factor analysis and structural equation models, is measurement models. Measurement models are statistical models. So a lot of things that you've learned in your previous coursework, even if that coursework wasn't about measurement, are going to be relevant. So my philosophy is that we can all do this. Here to help you do this, we're lucky enough to have two different TAs for this class. Let's see, do I see them here? I see Vladimir. Do you want to wave or say hello? Introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you right now. Hooray.
Awesome. Hey everyone, good to see you. My name is Vladimir. I'm a third year PhD student in the EMS program, and I'm here to help. I'm glad to see you all, and I hope we can work together.
Excellent. You have, thank you, Vladimir. You have one other TA that I do not see on my list. We'll see if she's able to join us later, which is Cass, who is a dissertation candidate in EMS. And their office hours are on the course webpage as well. So you'll have me to talk to, you'll have them to talk to, plenty of resources, hopefully, to make this experience as painless and entertaining as possible. Along those lines, my philosophy is that I believe in mastery learning. I don't believe in scaring you. So we're not going to do things that cause anxiety unnecessarily, like doing hand calculations or forcing you to memorize formulas. We're not going to do proofs or theorems or lemma or any of those words. If you'd like to do those things, there are places on campus where you can do that, but that's not going to happen here. We also, for the same reason, I don't do tests. Everything that you have to do is going to be on your own time. It'll take you as long as it takes, and you can keep trying until you get it right. The way that I've organized the structure of the materials is that we have units, which consists of a set of slides like these, as well as examples. And I have them divided into separate documents because the slides focus on the what and the why, and sort of the bigger picture ideas that persist across different software packages, across things, general concepts. And then I build separate example documents with annotated syntax, output, interpretation points, and graphs and things like that. And so I keep those things separate so that I can switch out software as needed. This class, you are going to learn M+. So how many of you have had exposure to M+ up to this point? Looks like maybe half. Watching for the little icons on the windows for everybody? Yeah. A little bit in Jonathan's classes, maybe a little bit from me as well. So the good news is that you will not be paying for M+. At this point, each of you has access to M+ through the University of Iowa Virtual Desktop. That's one of the things that I would like you to do sooner rather than later is log into the virtual desktop and go through the software packages and make sure that M+ is one of those that is listed. If not, then I will need to get help with the tech folks in making sure that they can get you connected. Not everybody has M+. I have to send a list of students who are enrolled in particular courses. Also, to some extent, R Levon can be used for these models, but I have found in trying to teach it in the past that not everything syncs exactly, and so there will become a point where those models are not going to generate the exact same answers, and that becomes problematic in terms of evaluation. So all of these things are hosted at the course website. That way you can download them. I do tend to fuss with my slides, and so if I make it more than a fussing update, if I update changes, I will put a new version and note when it was updated. That way you'll make sure that you always have the most recent version of everything. I know that my slides have a lot of words on them. Sorry, not sorry. Ideally, I want you to just sit and listen and think. I don't want you scribbling formulas or doing anything that would interfere with your processing of the material. So I know they're crowded. Whenever I give talks, like in research presentations or conferences, my slides don't look this packed. I try to do better, but I want to put everything in there so that you can sit and focus on learning rather than writing. That's my goal. So much so that during the pandemic, I had students who were walking on treadmills during class. They were multitasking. So yeah, if you don't have to write, you can do lots of things while you're in class. Like you can fold your laundry today, right? You can have lunch. It's 12:30. This is lunchtime. By the way, in our regular classroom, I don't think we're technically supposed to have food, but I'm not going to care. So just don't spill anything on the computers, and I think we'll be good on that score. All right, so this is the big picture. What about the course requirements? What is going to be expected of you this semester? Well, everything is take-home, open note, untimed. Nothing that will induce pressure or anxiety is my goal. I do accept late work. I know that things in life can go sideways without a moment's notice, and sometimes you just can't get stuff done. However, in order to encourage you to keep up with the sequencing of the class, because everything builds on itself, I do little penalties for late work. So if you turn in a homework assignment late, that's 2 points off your total grade of 100 points. 1 point for formative assessments. We'll talk about each of those in just a second. However, if you are planful, if you're looking at the list of due dates for things and you get to a week and you're like, I have a conference that week, or I signed up to do comps that week, or I'm going to be out of town, etc., let me know. I'm happy to extend the deadlines for you if you're planful and you realize that looking at the schedule that you're not going to be able to make something work in a given week. That being said, the due dates that you see on the course syllabus are the soonest that anything will be due. I may push them back to make sure that we have enough time to cover the material that is being requested of you in the assignment, but I will never move them sooner. And any time that I move a due date, I will update the website, update the syllabus, and send out announcements about that as well. But things are going to be due on Mondays for the most part. That's the goal. What's going to be due? One thing that you'll be working on is something I call formative assessments. What? Oh, okay, hang on. Question or background conversation?
And then 9 is about the discussion section, suggesting that we may want to explain further about the differences between left wing and right wing media, and their implications. So I think I can revisit more beginning with the different communication purposes and agendas and forum learning.
Okay, I think someone's multitasking. But if I'm wrong, please correct me and have my apologies. Okay, anywho, formative assessments. These are our opportunities to have structured review. I'm only going to be able to fit in 5 this time. The idea here is that I'm going to ask you questions about things that are sort of bigger picture or definitions that I need you to learn so that you can attach other concepts to those definitions. These are things that you should be able to answer off the top of your head. And if you can't, then that's an indication as to what material you might want to review and spend a little bit more time on. So each of these will be due on a Monday night. We will go over them as a group the next day on Tuesday. And if you do it and you make an honest attempt, you get your 2 points. So I do read these answers. It's my way of making sure that there's not common misconceptions or common things that we want to talk about. I provide a little bit of feedback, but nothing in great detail because I'm reading through these things quickly to be able to get a sense as to what folks know. And to that end, if you find yourself having questions like, I don't know what this question means, or I don't understand this, or can you go back over this thing, write that down. And I'll be happy to do that because that type of information is really helpful to me. So we'll do those things periodically. You will have 6 homework assignments. In this course, they are going to be a mixture of data that you have to analyze, where I know what the right answers are, and your own data. Because the best way to learn is by doing. And item level response data is something that is relatively easy to find. My guess is that most of you have data in mind that motivated your taking this course, or that other people who motivated you to take this course would have data to care about. So that would be the idea for homeworks 1, 3, and 5. And 2, 4, and 6 are the ones that are going to be using a custom online system. If you are new to my teaching, then you haven't seen this yet. I will make a video introducing how it works. If you've seen this before, it's the same thing that you're used to. So all of these homeworks, the idea is that you will get practice doing a type of model, and then you'll get to do it on your own data for real. So homework 1 is going to be, I have it on the next slide. It's like I knew what I was going to say. Homework 1 is going to be your chance to explore the background of psychometric properties of the items that you care about. So if you're working with an existing scale, if the scale's been around for a while, it probably has research about the properties of the scale. What evidence for reliability does it have? What evidence for validity does it have? Has measurement equivalence across different types of respondents been examined? That kind of thing. So homework 1 will ask you to find an article or 2 and answer some targeted questions about what is currently known about the items that you're interested in. And then 3 and 5 are going to be fitting measurement models to those data. So you don't have to figure this out today. Ideally, I'd like you to figure out what data you want to be able to use by February 12th is when the first assignment is due, but you don't actually need to have the data in hand until March. So you have some time to figure that out. I have lists here, links to various data sources that I'm aware of that would have item level data that is available for download. So I know several folks are in from psychology. Can I get some psych folks saying hi? There's a couple. Excellent. Welcome, psych folks. I'm a psych folk. My PhD is in psychology. Don't tell anybody, though. I work in the College of Ed now. So there's some personality items. There's a very large data set that this comes from. So things like, extroversion, neuroticism, sort of classic stuff like that, health behaviors, other stuff that's in there. There's all kinds of archives that are more specific to other types of social sciences. So ICPSR, for instance, has a lot of like public science kinds of stuff, sociology kinds of stuff. So if you're not sure what type of data would be useful to use in this class, then these are some resources. And if you're not sure if something will work, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Any response format, answers to items of any kind. So the typical item response format is ordinal. How much do you agree with this sentence or something like that? How often do you do this type of behavior? But any kind of response work. Response time could be a type of response that you're interested in analyzing. Slider bars, where you indicate continuously the extent to which you agree something. Those are fine too. Ideally, at least 100 respondents in the data set, but if you don't have that many, I can work with you. It just might mean that you need a little bit of help with model estimation and making things converge. So just putting that out there, at least 6 items that measure one thing, or 8 items thought to measure 2 things. That's the idea. So let that start percolating as to what kind of data you might want to use. And we have a question. I'm going to try Samantha. Did I murder your name, or is that close? See if I can hear you. If not, I might have to ask you to type. Still on mute, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna hit the ask to unmute button so I can hear you. Maybe. Okay, well, if you can type your question in the chat, and if anyone else has questions, the chat is probably the easiest place to put them because I'm guaranteed that I can read. I can't guarantee that I can hear you. Any questions up to this point? I'm going to pause to reload. Cheers. No questions so far. All right, cool. Onward then. So yes, big picture, learning how to do measurement models on your own data, that's the goal. Oh, we have more questions. Okay, Sergio, please try to talk, and if I can't hear you, I'll let you know.
So in that slide, you're saying 6 items for 1 latent trait or 8 items for 2.
Yep.
Is there a reason we're capping it at 2, or could we have data that potentially measures 3 or 4 latent traits?
Great question, and I'm glad I can hear you for the time being. Yes, you could have more. My goal in capping it is to make the level of difficulty and complexity across students comparable. Because once you get to the point where you have 4 or more items per trait, as you probably already know, then your model is over-identified and it becomes testable. And for that reason, I usually prefer for folks to look at each trait by itself, if possible, which is why I say 6 items provides enough room for things to go wrong for 1 trait. And once you know how to go through a process for 1 trait, then it's easy to repeat that process for 3 or 4 more, as many as you have. So if you have an item pool that has lots of traits, for instance, you might narrow it down to 1 or 2 for the purposes of homework. That way your assignment doesn't get too big, too complicated. However, if you're like, well, I want to do it anyway, I want to publish this, I'd like to do the extra work because I need to do it this way, Godspeed. Then you can do as much as you want to. But that's the reason, is to try and make it more comparable if possible. Charlotte, let's keep hearing.
Quick question, maybe you already went over this, but for homeworks 1, 3, and 5, do we need to have 3 different data sets for each of those, or could we use the same data set, just different
Same.
types of questions? Okay.
So the way that it's structured is homework 1 does not require you to have any data. Homework 1 is going to be a list of like 6 questions about the history of the measure that you're interested in. Like, what do people know about the characteristics of these items, their reliability, validity, and so forth. So it's more like a lit review kind of thing, because then that will help you know what to expect when you actually get to do the analyses. Homework 3 and homework 5 ideally should be on the same data, because you're going to fit one type of model the first time and a different type of model the second time. And part of what I'd like you to see is how differently the results turn out as a function of what type of model you used. Cool. All right, other folks. Still watching the chat if anyone's feeling shy. All right, moving right along then. So, my job is to help you. The reason that you're here is that if SEM were easy enough that you could teach yourself on the internet in 10 minutes, this would be a waste of everyone's time. It's deceptively complicated. And my job is to help you navigate that complexity. So there are a ton of readings. I'm not going to apologize for that either, because I like to give you a lot of resources. But my job, I feel like, is to orient you, to give you the starting point so that when you do end up reading things, you have a basis to hang those pieces of information on. So I view that as my job, not to go through the readings and have discussions about them, but to actually teach you sort of from scratch. And then the readings are designed to help fill in those gaps. So ideally, this is a lecture, so to speak, but I'd prefer that it be more of a conversation. So any questions that you have at any point, the best time to ask them, honestly, is during class. That way everyone gets to hear your answers. And I know folks are shy. So if you want to use the direct messaging feature in Zoom, even if you're sitting here in person, so that you don't have to ask your question in front of everybody, that's fine too. But I always say, as you've heard from other people, folks, there are no stupid questions. I truly, truly believe that. Because if you ask a question that you think is stupid or obvious, two things are going to happen. One is that half of the people are going to be relieved that you asked the question because they didn't know the answer either, and then they don't have to be the one to say it. The other half of the people are going to be like, oh, wait, I know that one. And they're going to listen to the answer, and then they're going to feel good about themselves because they knew the answer. Win-win either way. And if you're past that point where you're like, yeah, I knew the answer, I don't need the self-esteem boost today, then the next level is, okay, if you were to teach this, how would you have answered the question? How would you have explained it differently in the first place so that the question was unnecessary? There's always ways that we can challenge ourselves to think about the material from other people's perspectives. So I feel like there's a lot of value in that. But because the material is hard, I'm not going to assign you chapters and you come and present it or something like that. That works in certain types of contexts and certain types of material, but it doesn't really work for this. So that's my job. In terms of contacting me for questions and such, please email me first, not the TAs. However, if you work with them during office hours and you have a follow-up question about something you discussed with them, then I think it's fine to reach out to them. But I try to make it so that their workload is manageable. So your job then, ask questions, review frequently, especially things like notation, terminology, because once the symbols become automated in your mind, things get picked up a lot more quickly. If you're struggling to remember what something means, that takes focus away from whatever the thing is supposed to be doing in the context of the model. Questions. Can we use SEM to analyze semantic differential scale data? Possibly. Can you tell me what that is?
Okay, so that's if you have a question that has two ends, you're like, let's say, so my research mostly focuses on international communication or public opinion, and I'm asking people about if they think something is good or bad, then I'll have the scale on both sides. Good is on this side and bad is on this side. Then I have the scale ranges set from 1 to 5. 5 maybe is very good and very bad is 1. And then they have to pick 1. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would call those ordinal data. So there's a set of choices and they range in terms of amount or degree of agreement or opinion about something from bad to good. Am I saying that accurately?
So like they don't select. I don't know. I have an example, but then I don't know if I can share the screen. But I also have to find it. Maybe go ahead as I find it, and then I can share. Okay.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the answer is probably yes. SEM can do that. The question as to whether it's something we'll get to or if I have an example for it is a separate question. But hopefully, if it's not something that I have time to cover, I can point you in the right direction as to what other resources would be for that type of model. Because they do, like, once you understand the core tenets, then adding on to that is easier than if you don't have that core in place.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Rule number 1 when working on homework. If you get stuck on something, after 15 minutes, put it away. Stop and ask for help. 15 minutes of banging your head against something is long enough. If you find yourself opening Google or ChatGPT, stop. I don't want you to go down those rabbit holes. Ask me for help. There's a lot of expert advice on the internet, and ChatGPT is still not going to take my job away, I have learned. So rather than going outside for help, please talk to me, talk to your TAs, and let us try to help you. If you're working on homework and M+ is yelling at you, like you're getting an error message that something's happening and the model won't run, or the model doesn't converge, or you don't get output, something like that, it's helpful to me if you can take a screenshot of the files, because I can look at those quickly on my phone, rather than if you send me like the original input or output, I have to go sit down at a computer to open it up and look and see what it is, and that will take me until the next time I'm sitting at my computer. So I can usually respond to you more quickly if you can send me screenshots. I know that by assigning homework due on Monday evenings that I am signing up to answer your emails over the weekend. That's fine. You can contact me whenever it's convenient for you, and I will get back to you as soon as I can, usually within by the end of the day if possible. I do go to bed relatively early though, so if you contact me after like 9 o'clock, I'm too old. I'm not a boomer, but I'm on my way there, I think. So Gen X is going to bed early. Am I going to upload class readings? Not to my website. Those are an icon because I don't want to get yelled at for copyright infringement. So if you go to the course icon site, under the Files menu, there is a zip folder of all of the readings, including chapters of the textbooks that I'm using. All in one fell swoop, you'll have all of that. And the readings that go with each particular unit are on the course website on the right-hand column. So yes, speaking of the readings, there is a lot. Do I expect you to read and process every word? No. I think that the textbook is helpful. So the Brown Applied the CFA Confirmatory Analysis textbook, I like that one. There's some chapters out of the Embrinson IRT book that I like that I'm using, as well as a Sage Greeny Weenie book. And then I have a whole bunch of articles that are designed to give you further coverage of whatever it is we're talking about, or potentially an alternative viewpoint. So I would say make time for the readings as that permits, but they should not be done ahead of coursework. Formative assessments and assignments and attending class and asking questions should be your priority. All right. So, attendance. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. I don't take that lightly. Now, that being said, if you can't come to every class because life gets in the way, you're sick, you have other responsibilities, you're out of town, etc., okay. I don't take attendance and I don't require it. One second, Franklin. So I will tell you that I have been doing a hybrid course format since before the pandemic. I started in spring, it was actually spring 2020 before that. So I had a lead into the Zoom world. You can join via Zoom. You can join via in person. You don't have to tell me which one it's going to be. You can just show up. If you can have your cameras on, great. If not, that's fine too. I respect your privacy. If you're sick, please don't come to class and get me sick. Because if I get myself sick, then I get my kid sick and he gets his whole class sick, and we don't want any of that. So please be respectful of each other and stay home if you think that you've been exposed to COVID or whatever else is happening right now. As I mentioned at the start of class, in case you weren't here, everything that we do in this class is going to be recorded. So the way the recordings work is that it's capturing the audio of class, so mostly my microphone, but you're talking back if you sit close enough to the microphone, as well as the screen share. And there is a link to a YouTube playlist where these videos will be stored. I also put a link to each video on the course website at the end of that day, and those go up usually within an hour or two after class. So if you have to miss class, you can catch the recording. If you want to review something, you can catch the recording. The reason that I keep them on YouTube is because it does a pretty good job of transcription, and those become searchable. So if you're looking back at class and it's like, when did she talk about that? Type find, and you can find exactly in the video where I talked about that. So students have told me that that is a very helpful feature. If weather happens, and I would say snow and cold, but last spring I had to cancel 2 classes because of tornadoes. So weather broadly construed, if anything is going on that would close the public schools, odds are good I'm going to move to Zoom for that day. So I will email everyone and put changes up on the course website by 9 a.m. on days of class, but just know if schools are closed, odds are good we're moving to Zoom. Now that being said, if you are already on campus, then you can actually go to the classroom and Zoom from there. So you will have that space available to you regardless of what is supposed to be happening. There is one day this semester where comprehensive exams are happening in our classroom, and I have Zoom scheduled for that day already on the course syllabus as well. Okay, now back to the chat window here. An example question: what is your opinion about the relationship between A and B? A does not exploit B, all the way up to A does exploit B. Yeah, I would still just call that ordinal, because these are not really numbers. They're like levels of agreement, and we can't assume that they're equidistant in terms of how they relate to the trait. So yeah, I'd call that ordinal, and absolutely that's what homework 4 and 5 are going to be about. Okay. Software. So we're using M+. M+ is hella expensive. Student licenses for M+ are $175, I think, for the base package, going up to about $400 or $500. Do not buy M+. You don't spend your money on that. I can get it to you for free. The virtual desktop is sometimes a little bit slow and a little bit clunky, but I've gotten decent at troubleshooting issues with it, and it works good enough for most of what we need to do. If you have a giant data set that you're going to be using, then talk to me about that, because there might be other things that you might need to try instead of using it on the virtual desktop. But for the relatively small data sets, a couple of hundred cases or things, it should be just fine. Why? Is because it does everything. So it's the only package that fully integrates all of the things that I want to teach within the context of structural equation modeling. So for instance, there's also a class happening this semester on item response theory, which is one of the units that we're going to have. There's all kinds of different software packages that do item response theory models, but only M+, to the best of my knowledge, integrates SEM so that you can actually take the latent traits out of that and do stuff with them. And it does it under full information estimation rather than limited, which is usually better. So it's the only thing that does it all at once, is the short answer. Now that being said, I know how to use a bunch of different software packages, and if you want to practice what we're doing in class on others, here are some choices. So ours Lavon package is probably the most popular SEM package next to M+. I've learned how to use that, and it does a lot of the same things, but the answers as you increase in model complexity start to differ a little bit because of the way that the estimator works within the package. So we can't necessarily use that to do homework, because homework is checking to 2 decimal places for the right answers. Stata has an SEM package and a GSEM, so I think that's generalized SEM, that also does multi-level SEM. Those are pretty good. The only catch is that they address missing data differently within the GSEM package, and so again, they won't generate the exact right answers that M+ does. But you can use that for your own data analyses, and I can help you use either of those packages. Last but not least, SAS has a package called KLIS, and I don't even remember what that stands for. SPSS has an add-on called AMOS that is like a drawing thing. and it has code to it as well. To the best of my knowledge, those only have options for continuous responses, not ordinal responses, such as your example, and so we won't be able to use those. I also, when I first learned SEM a million years ago, I used EQS software, which I'm not sure if that's still a thing or not. But so that's a little bit about software. If you have questions about what will work and what doesn't work, let me know. What you do with your own data is your business. So if you're a Stata user and you want to use Stata's SEM package to do your individual assignments, that's totally fine with me. It's only the ones where everybody's trying to get to the same answers that the issues with different numeric precision come into play. Okay, there. So what is this class about? Big picture, 3 different broader categories of stuff. So the first unit is relatively quick. It's concepts and old school, as I like to call it. So this lecture, introducing terminology and considerations and kind of giving an overview as to how all of these models fit together in a general sense. Unit 2, which is why it's in parentheses here, is not something I'm going to spend time on in class. So on your syllabus, for instance, there's bonus material listed for Thursday. That is additional treatment of exploratory factor analysis and principal component analysis. I don't want to spend my time on those because EFA is not useful to me. PCA, principal components analysis, can be useful in certain contexts, but those usually aren't measurement contexts. So I'm making a deliberate choice not to spend time on exploratory techniques that I find less useful, but historically they still tend to get used. They have been used for a long time, which is why I do have some material on them. And then we'll talk about conventional measures of reliability within the context of classical test theory, traditional ways of examining how good your items work, and that kind of thing. Section 2 then gets us into latent trait measurement models. This is the bulk of the course. So we're starting with models that assume your item responses are continuous variables. That is what's known as confirmatory factor analysis, or CFA for short. If your models are for any other kind of response, binary answers, ordinal answers, nominal answers, any other kind of response that's not a continuous normally distributed variable, that's what the rest of the measurement models are for. So within this class, I will cover IRT stands for item response theory, IFA stands for item factor analysis, and then if you have other kinds of outcomes like counts of behaviors, for instance, how many times when you watched, let's say that you're looking at like transcripts or videos of mothers interacting with their children, how many times did this happen, this happen, this happen, and you're looking at a latent trait measuring some sort of parenting index, counts of behaviors would fall under this too. There's not a specific acronym or label that goes with those, but any kind of response can have a latent trait as part of that analysis. So that's one of the main ways in which the way that I approach this class differs from other traditional SEM classes is that I put it all together. Because what this is some kind of unobserved latent trait, defined here shortly, predicting some kind of outcome. And the models change based on what kind of outcome it is, but the concepts and stay exactly the same. Unfortunately, the notation and the vocabulary change, which makes these things seem more different than they actually are, but it's all one big world. Then in the last big section, we get into extensions. So multidimensional measurement models, how to address traits that are in your data that you don't want. So common variability due to how questions are worded or what type of respondent it is. Those lead to things known as method factors or bifactors. If you think you're measuring 5 things, but there's really one higher order thing above the 5 things, that's called a higher order model or a second order model. We'll talk about those. And then finally, the grand finale is a little bit of path analysis and structural equation models. And it's relegated to the last week or 2 of the course because honestly, the measurement models are the hard part. Once you get your latent traits built, looking at how they relate to other latent traits is the easy part. But everything underneath it is what's going to take our time because that's the devil is in the details for that. So that's the big picture of the class. All right, 112. How we doing, folks? Cheers. Am I talking too fast? No. Okay, let me know if I am. It's loosely correlated with caffeine intake, but there's always like a lag factor where all of a sudden I can like feel it kick in, you know. I'm teaching 2 courses this semester. Last fall I only had to do 1, so I'm trying to like keep my energy going throughout the afternoon here. And apparently the Minecraft is going well because he hasn't come down and said hi to me yet. But we'll see. All right, so then a little bit of backstory to this stuff, a little bit of history, a little bit of where this came from, and big picture, what is this stuff going to be about? So you don't need to worry if you don't understand everything that I'm saying right now, because this is all stuff we're going to get into greater detail. This is just big picture stuff for right now. So latent traits, the thing that this class is about, they need test theory. So traditionally, these things are phrased in terms of psychology. So we have words like psychological test and measurement or psychometrics, but all kinds of latent traits can be analyzed, not just things that are from psychology. So that's why there's a lot of people from this course from places across campus, because these models get used in a lot of different research contexts. The big picture is that measurement models are statistical models. They are ways to operationalize and answer research questions regarding measurement. So if I try to make a new scale to measure something, how do I know if what I've made is any good? The first step is to try to figure out, how do I even ask that question? Like, how do I take that idea of good and make it into something that becomes empirically falsifiable? Measurement models are a way to do that. And it bothers me when people say things like measurement and statistics, because this course is a perfect example of how that is a false dichotomy. Measurement models are statistical models. They are regression models in which the predictor is a latent variable instead of an observed variable. So everything that you've learned about regression, what's an intercept, what's a slope, what's variance left over, all of those concepts are completely relevant. Different branches of measurement occur for different types of responses, being measured by the latent traits, and one of these you probably are familiar with. So I didn't know this when I was initially taking this coursework, that what I was learning as measurement is really specific to one branch of it that's known as classical test theory, or CTT for short. So everything that you've learned about measurement probably started with this in mind. So how do I know if I have a good item? Well, I can take my response to that item and correlate it with the total score from my test. And if it's strongly correlated, that's a good item. If it's weakly correlated, that's a bad item. The idea that you can sum items together and have that sum mean something. Classical test theory is the logic by which that choice is justifiable. If you want to measure reliability, if you compute maybe an alpha statistic for reliability, that is part of classical test theory. There's a Spearman-Brown version of reliability. We're going to have one in this class called omega as another one. So a lot of this stuff falls under classical test theory. And my perspective of it is that that model that allows you to add up items and call the sum an index of something, that's a testable model. More specifically, for those of you who've had a little bit of this content, it's a parallel items model. If you add up items and you call that sum an estimate of someone's standing on a latent trait, the only way that you will get the same answer for that person if you actually estimated a proper latent trait model is if every item is equally related to the trait and they all have the same amount of error variability left over. That's parallel items. That's a very, very strict assumption, and I've never seen it hold in real data. But that's what a classical test theory model implies, is a parallel items model. So that will become a testable hypothesis down the road once we get into the actual latent trait measures. And I have a note here, the word pry is an abbreviation for probably. I would also accept probably as a shorthand, but it's usually pry when I say it. So what is a latent trait? That's what we're here to measure. It's an unobserved thing that we believe exists. We think it comes first. We think it causes people to answer questions or behave in certain ways. And those responses or those ways they're behaving are the only way that we can observe it. So classic examples in the context of educational measurement, usually we're trying to measure students' aptitude or achievement or intelligence or something like that. In personality, we might measure introversion or extroversion. In psychopathology, we might measure other types of adverse traits. Let's get some examples. So why are you here? What kind of traits do you care about? You can use your voices, hopefully, or you can use the chat. Let's get this going. Externalizing. That's the bad kind, right? It's like beating people up and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What else?
I'm interested in cognitive mechanisms of reading behaviors.
Cognitive mechanisms. Oh, that's a tricky one. So the way that people read or respond to reading like tasks, those are going to be your items?
Yeah.
Excellent. English writing ability. Okay, yes, definitely within the educational measurement. Disease prevalence and spatial measures of stressors. Oh, that's going to be another interesting one. Language ability. Yeah, teacher epistemic orientation. Oh, I know that one. This will be like the 4th time that I've helped with students with that one. I still, if you put a gun to my head, I can't tell you what epistemic means still, but one day I will eventually learn, I think. Multicultural orientation. That's another different one. Risk. Okay, another adverse one. Risk of perpetuating sexual assault. Yes. So the common denominator for these latent traits to be useful to us should be the idea that it came first. Like this is something that's within you, and that something causes the way you answer the questions. That's known as a reflective set of indicators, or a reflective trait, as opposed to formative, which is the opposite. One more. Immigrant adaptation and social capital. Yeah. See, some of those, Hillary, might be heading into the formative side of things. So this is a distinction that we'll get into more, but briefly, formative is where the items come together to create a new thing, like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of idea, versus reflective is the thing came first and it's creating the answers to the items. Teacher beliefs and classroom learning. Yeah, that should be another one where that would be another reflective. So just to make this a little more concrete, formative, a classic example of that is socioeconomic status. That's something that a lot of fields need to control for or otherwise measure so that they can say that what they care about is not just a reflection of that. But how do you measure socioeconomic status? Any sociologists here today? I know I've got a couple. Things like one's education, one's parents' education, income, type of job you have, where you live sometimes, like sort of neighborhood prestige, census data, that kind of stuff. Those sorts of indicators, it's tricky to think that SES is a latent variable that shows itself in these ways. Like, what would be the mechanism that causes me to be educated, that causes me to have this job, that causes my parents to have their levels of education? It's hard to think about a common cause that creates all of those things. It's a lot easier to think about it from the opposite perspective, formative, which is where these things come together to create this whole that's greater than that. Another example that I can think of is busyness. Everyone's busy, right? How are you? Oh, I'm just so busy. But busyness comes in a lot of forms, right? Busyness can be, I'm a student, I have a job, I have a family, I'm taking care of children, I'm taking care of my parents, I'm training for a marathon. There's all kinds of ways that you can be busy, but busyness is not a thing that causes all of those different behaviors to happen. Like, busyness is the sum total of those behaviors. So this class is not going to focus on those kinds of models because they are not identified all by themselves. That's a distinction we'll get into later, but basically in order to fit those kinds of models, you have to have other stuff in there in order for it to even work. And that is not desirable from a content and theoretical perspective. So what we're going to spend the bulk of our time on is the reflective type of latent variables, where the thing came first and it causes you to answer the questions or engage in the behaviors in whatever way that you're measuring as the observed outcome. Okay. You're going to hear me switch back and forth across what I call the responses we're going to be analyzing. I will take the shorthand as items often. Sometimes I will say indicators, which is more common within CFA. So if it's an item response theory model, items is the natural way to say it. Indicators gets used otherwise. These are synonyms. So the responses that we're going to be analyzing as outcome variables can be shorthand referred to that way. Okay. How we doing? Still with me? Still excited to be back in school? Yeah, there you go. Fake it. Fake it till you make it. All right, so what is this latent trait called is the next thing. Guess what? Synonym palooza. I could probably ask each of you for a name, and you would all come up with a different name for what a synonym for latent trait is. So in our first unit, if we're talking about classical test theory, the latent trait is called your true score, or capital T is how it's usually notated. In the world of confirmatory factor analysis, it becomes a factor score, also with the word latent thrown in front of it. So latent factor, latent trait, latent construct, latent variable. Is that all the latents? Think of any others? Trait, construct, variable, factor, latent true score. I don't know. There's a lot of them. When we get to IRT, it's called theta. The entire IRT world has just agreed. They're going to call it theta, and it's this symbol. All of these things are the same. These are all words that people use to describe this unobserved thing that we're trying to capture with observed responses instead. The difference across the families of measurement lies in the approach that is taken to the item responses. In classical test theory, the first thing you do is sum them up, and you take that sum and you call it the latent trait. And if you're like, well, what if I take the average instead because I have missing data and I don't want to bias the sum with missing data? Cool, it doesn't matter. A sum score or an average score fundamentally has the same properties. In this world, the sum is the latent trait. So that means that the items and the people are inherently tied together. Everybody has to answer the same items for their scores to be comparable. You can't shortcut that. You can't avoid easy items or too hard items and customize it. Everyone has to have the same. And there's ambiguity in how those scores should be interpreted as a result. So if I give a class a test and everybody gets 90% or higher, is it an easy test or do I have a smart class? I don't know. You can't know. What latent trait measurements models do is break the tie between the items and the people so that the latent trait is a separately estimated variable in the analysis. It is not the sum of the items anymore. It is a thing that is thought to predict the items. So the item responses are the outcomes. The latent trait is the predictor. So in that perspective, it's exactly like a regression model. And what type of regression model depends on what type of outcome it is. So this is advantageous for being able to change the test as needed, either within a setting or across time. So you may have heard of phrases like linking or equating or vertical equating, where you're trying to take different sets of items and tie them together so that the trait is on the same scale and remains comparable. That can only happen if you break the tie between the persons and items and allow a separate latent trait that's not just the sum of the items. So then what kind of model it is depends on what type of response you have. And then each of those has ways of indexing reliability and dimensionality and all of the other things that we would typically care about. So that's the big difference, is that we're working with item level data as opposed to a sum score or a test score as the index of the latent trait across these different models. So then we get into the specifics. If you are willing to pretend that your item responses are continuous variables, that is what confirmatory factor analysis is for. Do any of you have item response formats that are truly continuous? Anyone? That's what I thought. And your traditional SEM class would stop there and be like, well, do you have at least like 5 choices? Because then it's continuous. It's fine. Don't worry about it. In reality, it's not that simple. The closest thing I've ever seen to truly continuous is response time. But once you get into tasks where they're measured in milliseconds, response time is lower bounded at 0, so it's even truly not continuous in that case. Slider bars are designed to give you more variability because you can stop it wherever you want, but they have boundaries. And you can't predict a response that goes outside the boundaries. So for other types of outcomes, which is what people usually use in self-report data at least, that's where we get into the world of IRT, item response theory, or item factor analysis as a synonym. That is conceptually the same idea as generalized regression models, which is the class I'm teaching in a half hour. So have you heard of logistic regression before? Where you have a binary outcome and you predict it with stuff? Several of you should be nodding. Yeah, guess what? That's IRT, folks. The end. It's really that straightforward. The difference is that in logistic regression, your predictors are observed columns in your data set, and in IRT, they are not. They are latent traits. So if you can hang on to that, then you can start to see how all the stuff that you've learned before fits under this umbrella. There are different ways of expressing that regression model of how the latent trait predicts your categorical outcomes, and those different ways of talking about it map onto these different words here. I will teach you how to get from one to the other and how to think about them both as all one kind of idea. You can have measurement models for any kind of outcome, including counts as another one, like I said. More in terms of terminology then. So SEM as the acronym, that refers to models that have latent traits and relationships among multiple latent traits are specified. How they're specified is up to you. They can be regressions where one predicts another. They can just be covariances where one just correlates with another. But that's what SEM is for. So the building block of SEM are these latent trait measurement models by themselves. Once we get each of the latent traits set up the way we want it and it's supported by the data, then we can put them all together to look at relationships between variables at the latent level, which should be a better version of the relationship estimated with less error so that you get a stronger effect. That's the idea. So, because you've isolated all of the individual item-specific error away, and what's left is a latent trait that's supposed to be a better measure than what any one item would reflect. So we're spending a lot of time on the measurement model portion of the program because that's where things go wrong. If you've heard of path analysis, that has nothing to do with this class. Traditionally, path analysis is taught in SEM classes, but it's just a regression model. Path analysis is a model that involves only observed variables and they relate to each other in whatever ways you specify. I actually teach path analysis at the end of the generalized modeling class that's happening starting at 2 o'clock. If you've heard the term mediation, that's regression with a better marketing campaign behind it. You can do mediation models in path analysis, and moderation is just interaction terms. So all of these things can be done in path models using observed variables, or they can be done in structural equation models using latent variables instead, or a mixture of both as well. Okay, so a little bit of history here about where this stuff came from. A lot of the difficulty in learning this material is that people use different words and different notation for the same thing. But the reason for that is because they were developed in separate streams of research and industry for separate purposes. So we have like the traditional educational model where we're interested in looking at students' abilities, and a lot of times the answer format would be correct or incorrect for certain types of problems, potentially partially correct, but not usually. In psychology and in fields where we're interested in looking at personality or intelligence or other things like that, then usually you're asking people to agree with stuff, like the example that was shared earlier. How much do you agree with this statement? Or if you're looking at behaviors, how often do you do this? Never, sometimes, often, frequently, always, etc. So right off the bat, like different models are needed because the way that people ask the questions is different. And the way they ask the questions is necessarily different because of the thing they're trying to measure. There is only one right answer if you're solving a math problem, for instance. There's not necessarily a right answer in a lot of other contexts. A lot of this stuff came from an era in which people did not have computers. So they had to make up workarounds. So for instance, one of the reasons why alpha as a measure of reliability continues to be popular is that you can compute it easily. You don't need to learn structural equation modeling software or anything more complicated. You could probably do it in Excel if you wanted to. Exploratory factor analysis, methods of extracting factors based on matrix algebra, could be done by hand or could be done with simple computers back in the day, and that's why this stuff got developed. But the good news is that we don't need it anymore. Now we can do analyses on any device. Hell, I could probably do analyses on my phone at this point. I'm sure I could log into the remote desktop and do M+ on my phone. That would be quite painful, but I bet I could do it. So a lot of the stuff that you see in terms of measurement and older stuff was necessary at a point in time, but it's no longer necessary today. The lineage of where this stuff came from, 2 papers that were published in 1904, one talking about how to isolate error from test scores and the other looking at common factors. And so this sort of led to 2 different developments in terms of the lineage of these research. So classical test theory, to start with then, is always shown by this equation. Your total score is a function of your true score, so your actual standing on the latent trait plus some kind of error. Graphically, you will start to see pictures like this throughout the semester. This little picture here is a path diagram. And everyone on Earth has agreed on specs by which to draw these diagrams. So here's your first exposure to them. Things in boxes are real. Things in boxes are columns in your data set that you actually have. Things in circles are pretend. I mean latent. I mean pretend. I mean unobserved. Those are all synonyms. So this equation right here is described by this diagram by saying that y total is being predicted, because we have arrows going into it, by something we don't know, which is a person standing on the trait, true score, and something we don't know, which is whatever deviation from that true score is creating the total together. And if you only have one piece of information and you're trying to solve 2 unknowns, any math folks here? Can I get a judge's ruling on that? 1 piece of information and 2 unknowns. Is that going to work well? If all I have is this, there's no way I can look at this and say how much of this total is due to true versus error. That fundamental problem is what a whole lot of stuff was developed to try and solve. It's like, well, let's work around this and try and solve this with just test score. So we want to try and use whatever information that we have to quantify how much of the total variability here in this outcome is due to true versus error, and that's the traditional definition of reliability. There's different ways to get a number that goes with that, but that's the main idea, is how much of what goes into this total score is signal versus noise, true versus error. And because we're not working with the individual items, we're just adding stuff up, we have to make assumptions about the items, that they're exchangeable. So how do you make your measure more reliable? You add more items. According to this method of indexing reliability, the number of items is part of the computation. So how do you make your measure stronger? More items. What kind of items? Should I add more easy items or more hard items or more discriminating items? No, just more. More. It's all good. More is all you need. So from this perspective, we're just trying to get rid of error. We're not trying to figure out why it's there or when it showed up or what the deal is. Error is a unitary construct and it's always bad. So then the question is, how do we get rid of it? More items, standardization, controlling confounds experimentally, that kind of thing. The lineage of this, people saying, hey, no, wait a minute. Error is not just error. Like, there's kinds of error. Doesn't that matter? Yes, it does. That is the basis of another class that's being offered this semester, generalizability theory, or G theory as it's known, not to be confused with Spearman's G for intelligence or any other Gs. This is where, if you have a complex enough item design, you can start to piece apart each of these things. So for instance, if I need to compute a reliability coefficient when I have multiple raters of multiple targets and there's some overlap but not complete, what do I do? Well, that's where G-theory types of models can help you try to figure it out. How much of the variability is due to who's doing the rating, who the target is, some potential interaction between the two if you have the data to support that, what day it is, etc., etc. And as an aside, come back here, come back. There we go. The modern day way that these things can be estimated in the context of a larger model is using mixed effects or multi-level models. So these different variance components can be operationalized, estimated, quantified in the context of a structural equation model, any other kind of regression model, multi-level model, etc. So there's also connections to those other classes that I teach with respect to this idea of classical test theory and delineating error. So then we get through a little bit of history here in terms of how things further developed. The alpha coefficient, by the way, the entire world calls it Cronbach's alpha because that's who got the credit for it, but someone actually did it first independently. Someone named Gutman, by the way. There's a couple chapters from the McDonald test theory book, and in that book he makes a big point about this because apparently he knew the guys and didn't want Gutman to not get credit much longer. But here's what I want you to know about alpha, and we'll talk about why in the coming weeks. It's not a good measure of reliability. If you have a good alpha, that means you have enough items. Doesn't mean they're any good. Doesn't mean they're measuring one thing. Alpha takes two pieces of information, number of items and average inter-item correlation. So it really can't tell you very much about how good your items are or whether they even measure one thing. It assumes they do. Then we get into classical test theory stuff that's continually developed and other contributions of Spearman. So 139, I think this is probably a good stopping point. What do you think? Yeah, I got 17 slides in. That's pretty good for me, actually. That's about the going rate, So we do have, let's see, 4 minutes left here. Let me see if there anyone else is here that casts. Nope, don't see her. Okay, so with the 5 minutes that we have left, questions? No questions yet. So let me ask you on a thumb scale here, how are we feeling about this upcoming semester? Your choices range continuously from thumbs up down to thumbs sideways, which is like, meh, no, down to thumbs down, which is no, I'll be dropping shortly, thank you. Need a survey? Thumbs sideways, fair. I like honesty. Yeah, it's a continuous. You can do like 45-degree angles. Yeah. Okay. So mostly up, a little bit sideways. I'm going to keep working on it. Question. Where are the slides posted? Oh, that is a great question. They are posted right here. And after class today, I will add to this little box and put a link to the video, and that video will be hosted on YouTube, so you can get there from this link, or you can sign up for the playlist that goes with the class, which is linked from the syllabus. And yes, this webpage I know is very like 1995. Sorry, not sorry for that again, because it's all one page and everything is here. So I'm going with old school because it's simple and the table makes it easy for me to figure out what has been posted and what hasn't. All right, question, Elizabeth.
Yes, I checked the Citrix workspace and I'm not seeing M+ on it.
Okay, did you go to the list of all the programs? Like the giant tab that has everything?
I'm not sure.
Because when you log in, there's like the ones that you've used most recently are like separate. Like there's like a favorites page and then there's like the giant list.
I think I was on the giant list, but let me double check. I'll report back.
Okay. Yes, if you can't find M+, please let me know. I arranged for everyone to get access last week, but it's possible that they may have accidentally missed one or two folks.
Yeah, I'm having the same thing. Yeah. Even like the stats packages category or the stats analysis.
Okay. If you do not see M+, when you log in, please send me an email because then I will need to get a list of all those folks and get that taken care of. So thank you for checking already. We won't be using it for like a month or so we've got some time to solve this issue. Speaking of which, since we have the website open here, nothing's due next week. We're going to ease into the semester. I figured half the classes might end up being on Zoom anyway. The first thing that you will have to do is an extra credit opportunity, homework 0. So that is getting to know my online homework system and practicing it. You get 2 points extra credit if you do it. I'd like it to be done by the second week. That way I can make sure everyone is in there and is able to log in. But if it's late, I'm not taking off late points for that. So basically then you get a free late homework. Okay, we got a intro to the virtual desktop is not pointing to the right place. I will fix that. That is, yeah, it's pointing to the old class. I will fix that too. Thank you. These are excellent questions.
Hi, Lisa, I have a question. Can you
Yes.
repeat the distinction between the formative and reflective indicators?
Yes. So formative is a model in which the indicators are the predictors and the latent trait that they combine to create is the outcome. It's consistent with the idea of a principal component model. Reflective is the opposite, which is what we're spending our time on. It's the idea that the trait itself is the predictor and that logically it causes the answers to the responses. So the direction of causality, like theoretically, goes from the trait to the answers rather than the other way around.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so please email me if you don't see M+ on your list. I will fix the broken links because the stuff is up there. I just have to fix the links, and I will post the video when it's done processing. So 144. Am I on the right page? Yeah, I think somehow one of my pages got screwed up. Thank you for noting that too. I will fix everything. I promise. I swear I'm competent. I'm just a little crazy from being stuck inside with my son forever. I will get all of my working memory load back soon as he goes to school. It'll be an exciting day. All right, thanks for being here. I hope to see you on Thursday in person, hopefully. If that changes, I'll let you know. All right, peace out. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.